So I'd like to welcome everyone here today to Archive on Screen, a webinar about opening up heritage material to creative reuse in film and media. And I'm joined today by Laura from EU Screen and some guest speakers. So Laura's going to be my co-host, special co-host. And we have some guest speakers who we'll introduce to you shortly. But it's so great to be here talking about creative reuse of digital heritage, one of our favourite subjects at Europeana. So if you could put the next screen up, next slide on, Tamara. Thanks so much. So we are going to have some presentations and we're going to see some films, as you can imagine. So that'll be about 20 minutes. And then we'll have a short moderated discussion. Please do put your questions and comments in the chat. If we have some time at the end, we will try to pose the questions that you have to our speakers. If not, then we can always follow up with you later, but we'll see how it goes. So next slide, please, Tamara. Thanks so much. So at Europeana, we have inclusive engagement guidelines. So we really like everyone to listen and read with the same energy and focus that you would like to be heard and listened to. Embrace a learning mindset. So be aware that you might have some biases and have the courage to be curious about what you might not know or understand. We respect all points of view. We hold space for multiple perspectives and lived experiences to influence what we do and why we do it. So that means we maintain a space where participants can be without fear of attack, ridicule, or denial of their experience. So we also ask that you would own any errors that you might make, apologize, and make amends. Of course, we can all be wrong sometimes. We also maintain that any person has the right to speak up and let us know if a boundary has been crossed. So if you would like to flag anything at any point to Europeana staff, please use the direct message in the chat. You can direct message Georgia Evans. She's our Europeana representative who's in the chat, or you can DM me as well, of course. And Georgia, you'll just be, have you put the guidelines in the chat? Hi, Georgia. Thanks. So, Georgia will put the guidelines in the chat as well if you want to read them in full. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So yeah, before we get started with the speaker presentations, I'd like to tell you just a few words about why we're having these webinars right now about creative reuse. So of course, at Europeana, we have a lot of cultural heritage data coming from all over Europe, and what we think is really important, aside from preservation of our culture, of course, is that people are really using the cultural heritage data. They're really doing things with the objects. And we're looking especially into specific types of reuse in media right now. And one of the things that came up is filmmakers and how filmmakers can use heritage materials. So we really wanted to look into that, and also with a view to understanding how cultural institutions can share data in such a way to make it easier for filmmakers and other creatives to use the material. And so I would like to introduce you to my co-host, Laura from EU Screen. If you'd like to say a few words as well, say hello.
Hi, everyone. Really happy to be here as well. Thanks, Fiona. So we're co-hosting this webinar, EU Screen and Europeana today. And EU Screen is a network of European broadcasters, archives, media scholars, technical experts, and we facilitate access to and engagement with archival audiovisual content through our online portal. And that's why we've joined forces today. So I think without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Shane O'Sullivan. I think we can move on to the next slide as well. Yeah, that's great. Shane is here today joining us from Kingston University in London, where he is the Associate Professor and Head of the Department of Film and Photography. Shane's work as a filmmaker includes 4 archive-driven feature documentaries exploring contemporary political history. And Shane is also the UK principal investigator on the Make Film History project, which opens up the archives for creative reuse. And I believe that today Shane is going to tell us a bit more about this really cool project. So Shane, over to you.
Thanks very much, Laura and Fiona, and obviously Europeana and the screen have been a great inspiration and a resource for us on the project. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll just take you through Make Film History in a brief presentation. So this actually started when I first came to Kingston and was teaching documentary to kind of new students in first year, and didn't really have a source of ready-made archive for them to work with on a documentary production module. So following a very successful pilot with the British Film Institute, the Make Film History project was born, and it now offers over 300 films from the BBC, the British and Irish Film Institutes, and Northern Ireland Screen for creative reuse by students and emerging filmmakers in the UK and Ireland. So I think maybe later we'll discuss, where you source archive and how you can source it on under what kind of license. So in this case, we've gained, I suppose, the trust of the archives in terms of gathering a pool of films that they can make available under a non-commercial educational license. So how it works is that the educational institution or a film festival or a training organization will actually sign a blanket license for the students or filmmakers studying with them to use it under an institutional agreement. And another thing that we decided when we kind of evolved the project was that the archive should be a point of inspiration for the filmmakers to go out and shoot some material themselves in response to the archive. So we kind of were determined to just allow them to use extracts of up to 2 minutes so that they weren't relying on the archive, and it wasn't just an archival mashup, but very much a creative response to what they saw in the archive and how that resonated with their experience, their life, their community, or the history of their family maybe, or their local area. So that was kind of the evolution of the project. I've been working very closely with Dr. Kira Chambers at University College Cork over the last 5 years on the project. And the platform that we've developed on the Make Film History platform is a dedicated blockchain licensing and delivery platform, which hosts all of the material. And you can either log in as a staff member or as a student user with different levels of access, and then watch and download the films within that platform. So basically every academic year, students can download up to 10 films from the collection for reuse on on course-related projects. And, those are quite good quality ProRes films for them to use in their work. And it's now used by about 100 HE institutions, film festivals, and training organizations across the UK and Ireland. It is bound by those territories at the moment, but I've been speaking to Fiona, Laura, and various other probably attendees in the meeting about potentially extending this to the European Cultural Creative Cloud, Cultural Heritage Cloud in the not too distant future. So we'll see where we go to with those particular plans. I think in terms of some of the applications of the project, we've worked with the BBC for a BBC 100 project around their centenary a couple of years back, where we worked with 50 filmmakers in 4 cities around the UK, doing workshops with them over the summer, and then developing 46 new films from those filmmaking teams, which we then showcased on the project website and on the BBC website. So you'll be able to see those if you go to our archivesforeducation.com website. And also we've been collaborating with Sheffield DocFest over the last couple of years. We ran a very successful Make Film History Challenge leading into the festival last year, which produced over 30 films, some of which were showcased at an industry session during the festival. And we've just actually worked with Sheffield DocFest and Reuters Screen Ocean. So it's a different pool of content, up to 1 million clips from the Reuters Screen Ocean collection. And we've been working with over 100 filmmakers from around the world on that, where there isn't a territorial kind of limitation. And we've just received the 61 submissions from the filmmakers. So we're very excited to now begin to look at those and showcase some of them on the DocFest website and at the festival next year. So I think that's a whistle-stop tour of the project. We also have a free creative reuse guide and online course in archive-inspired filmmaking on our website. And I'm just going to show a couple of clips to finish, just to give you a sense of one of the films that was created through the BBC 100 project, and also just a taste from filmmaker Mark Cousins, who was interviewed for the online course. So if we just go to the next slide, hopefully we can see those clips. I think we need the
Passing
sound.
place sign. I wanted to stand next to the sign and recreate this photo, this memory of hers, peek into her family history. I wasn't born at the time that this photo was taken, and I don't remember my time here in the Highlands with her at all. But I know that this place was too remote for her to stay, and she left for the city. This place does a lot for me, even although now it has become a passing place. The things it offered me, space, time, connection to the landscapes, it has a certain magnetism that will always pull me back to it.
The biggest mistake, I think, is to write a script and then look for footage to illustrate that. You get a wallpaper effect, and so many times I think filmmakers make that mistake. The words come first. We are in a visual. This is a visual medium. Therefore, it's really important, I think, to look at the footage first and see what's there. Whatever your subject, like I made a film called The Story of Looking, which is about the visual world and an operation I had in my eye. I looked at archive footage first and clips first. Excuse me. Once I had chosen the material, then I sat at my computer and wrote to the image. So the image is in front of my eyes, and so I'm writing about what I see. The effect that has is that you write in the present tense. So I will say here, now, this. These are the words I will use about the image that the audience will see.
And just to finish up, I think Shanine's film that was just played there, an excerpt, that was a response to a BBC film called The Smallest School in Britain, which reminded her of the school in the Highlands where she grew up. And then she went back and filmed with her father's video camera, which her father had used to film her when she was younger. So she, it was not just a response to the archive itself, but actually picking up an archival camera, an archival object, and going making the film with that. And obviously that was present in the texture of the film. So I think it's a good example of the kind of responses that we've had. Okay, so I think that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Shane. That was a very wonderfully short summary of such a huge project. The smallest school in Britain. I think we'd all like to hear a bit more about that at some point. But we'll save all questions and discussions for the second half of this session. So now we'd like to hear from Jordi Marquez. Jordi is a television producer at Minoria Absoluta in Spain, and over the past 30 years, Jordi has produced more than 60 documentaries and documentary entertainment series, and Jordi has been working, scanning and editing more than 1,500 minutes of 35mm and 16mm archival items. And today, Jordi is going to tell us a bit more about his project where he's used footage from the RTVE archives. So Jordi, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you, Fiona. First of all, I want to apologize for my English so long without using it, so I will try to be as much clear as I can. Please, if it's not enough, do not hesitate to ask me to repeat anything, okay? You say something about Radio Televisión Española archives, but we do not use it Radio Televisión Española archives. We use it Filmoteca Española archives. Filmoteca Española is the huge public institution in Spain who they research, recovery, and have preservation of all Spanish film heritage, okay? And they have the biggest collections of this country. But first, to talk about Los Archivos Secretos del Nodo, the last production we made for Radio Televisión Española, I want to explain something about this company. Minoria Absoluta was the first company in Spain that in 2015 makes the first documentary scanning 4K movies from Spanish Civil War and colorizing. Please put the Vimeo on, the video that I said in the next slide. Put it on, please. So we made this production for Televisión Española, Los Archivos Secretos del Nodo. That means Nodo's secret archives. And for make this production, we began to work with Filmoteca Española, as I said, in 2015, making Spanish Civil War in color. This production was really huge because we were the first company colorizing black and white archives in Spain. We did it by ourselves. I mean, we didn't know anything about how to put color inside a black and white footage, and we did it. And we premiered in cinemas this film. Then Warner Bros. Discovery broadcasted through more than 150 countries. So the success of a Spanish Civil War in color allowed our company, Minoría Absoluta, to keep working in the same path, in the same way, doing several films, doing the same techniques. Franco's Life in color, Spanish 20th century in color, a lot of them. So we have been working with a lot of old archives, the oldest one in Spain. The archives of Spanish Civil War are unique. There are a lot of films that there are only one copy, and that's it. There are not another one in the world. So we have to take very care scanning all these films and colorizing. Okay, so working with Filmoteca Española in 2019, we discovered that they had an extremely big storage inside the building with a very big collection with a label Unpublished. These unpublished films comes from a collection called Nodo. And Nodo were the newsreels that was mandatory to premiere it in cinemas during Franco's dictatorship in Spain between 1943 and 1981. They produced about 1,900 reels. These reels are 10-minute reels with so many different news. And it was the most important propaganda tool of Franco, that is this guy you're watching now, the Franco, the dictator. And that was a very propaganda tool. In Nodo, you will find what the government wants to show to people, how Spain was the perfect place to be, the perfect country, and Nodo didn't show anything wrong. But when we went inside this storage in Filmoteca Española and we found this amount of reels with unpublished label, we thought that it would be so nice to explain why Nodo make all these filmations and they were not allowed to show all these films. So we talked with them. We talked with Radio Televisión Española, the public Spanish television. They said, okay, this is a great show, let's do it. But Filmoteca Española was not really very happy with this idea, because when you want to touch a reel that no one did before, all these reels were indexed and reviewed. So it takes 3 years to talk with them. It takes 3 years to say, come on guys, let us go inside this storage and let us to open these reels. What we didn't know is that this storage contains 10,000 reels of filmations never seen before. And 10,000 films is a huge amount of films to manage in just a single television show. So we talked with them. We began this production 1 year ago, and we put our own team inside Filmoteca Española, 5 people, just to opening every can, checking every reel, cleaning, restoring, and scanning 4K. And then 1 year before, we have been open 404 canes of 10,000. That's really, is not too much, but it's a lot. We move more than 3,000 minutes of archives. And then we make this production. Los archivos secretos del Nodo show to public what Nodo didn't want to show 50, 60, 70 years ago. And this is very interesting because we found a lot of films with poor people, poor places, accidents, train accidents, plane accidents, everything that the government didn't want to show. We also discovered it with Beatles coming to play in Barcelona, real never seen before, woman playing football or woman doing things. Poor people, we discovered a reel of Princess Grace Kelly of Monaco visiting Mallorca. We discovered films of Maria Callas, the opera singer in Bilbao. So there is a lot of films inside this storage that they are amazing. They are so beautiful. They are in perfect conditions. And we have made a show, an unbelievable show. It was broadcasted 1 month ago with a being leader of audience with a 15%, more than 1.5 million people watch this show. So that means that if you are able to make a great show with archives, people are really very interested. So we wish to keep working in a second season, in a third season, in a fourth season, because we have 9,400 reels to open in the years to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jordi. That was beautiful to see the live coloring of these images. That's really, really incredible. There's also quite a few questions coming in as well. Again, we'll get to those in just a second. Fiona, would you like to introduce our third and final speaker, Mai?
Yes, thank you so much. So great to hear everyone so far. And next up, we have Mai Nguyen from Frankfurt, Germany. That's where she's based. She's a curator and researcher who works as a project coordinator at the German Film Museum and Film Institute. She also runs Blickwechsel Jetzt, a film club for young people, which meets monthly at the Film Museum. She has a background in film studies and is studying for a master's in film culture, archiving, programming, and presenting at the Goethe University in Frankfurt. And she's going to tell us all about this project called The Past is Not Another Country, Doing Archives Differently. So over to you, Mai.
Yeah, thank you, Fiona and Laura, and thank you for inviting me to speak here. And also thank you, Shane and Jordi, for your interesting presentations. So I'm here to present the project The Past is Not Another Country, Doing Archives Differently, which is a 2-year cooperation between the German Film Institute and Film Museum, where I work, and the Cinema Transtopia, which is a cinema based in Berlin. I'll just say shortly something about the German Film Museum and our project partner. We are a film heritage institution with our own archive, museum, and cinema based in the city of Frankfurt, and our work is dedicated to the preservation, exhibition, and mediation of historical and contemporary cinema. The Cinema Transtopia is a cinema and community space in Berlin, which understands itself as a space for social discourse and exchange, and also has its own film collection. These two institutions came together in this project, which began in April this year, to rethink and experiment with new practices for collecting, presenting, and mediating film histories. The title of our project is also a modification of a quote by the British author L.P. Hartley, who wrote that, quote, "The past is a foreign country, they do things differently there," end of quote, which is, of course, based on an understanding of the past as a closed chapter and something foreign with its own rules and traditions. And our project takes up this notion, but turns it on its head. We want to approach the past not as something that is self-contained and unchangeable, but as a living process which can be continually reshaped and put into dialogue with present perspectives. A very important part of our work is research. We look into our own archives for films which have been ignored by canonical film history. And while doing so, we're also trying to expand and critically reflect on this notion of a national film heritage. So we're also interested in filmmakers who have worked transnationally, for example, who came as international students to German film schools and shot a few films here before moving somewhere else. That's why we're also looking at other archives, such as those of film schools and also broadcast archives and private collections, among many others. So we were also very keen on collaborating with other organizations and curators. And we also often invite people to have a look at our collections and create a program based on their interest. So the example that I want to show you today, which I think is relevant for this webinar, as it is a creative intervention into the archive to critically reflect on a specific narrative and to produce a new one out of this, is a work that we commissioned by the artist and researcher Nena Unoa. It's based on an educational film which she found in the collection of the cinema Transtopia. And this film was a German adaptation of a BBC production from 1975. So if you could go to the Vimeo link, we can watch a few minutes from it.
The first of this afternoon's programmes for schools and colleges follows in 1 minute.
No. I've never said it. Yeah, I don't remember. It's so long ago. It's almost 50 years ago. I think that it wasn't even 75. I think it might have been 71.
You can stop here.
Just when I finished my secondary school.
So the voice that you hear on the soundtrack is one of the family members who were portrayed in this film, and Nena, the artist, actually managed to find him online and he agreed to do a video call with her where they talk about his memories of the shoot. And she also managed to find another family member who also agreed to be interviewed. And what becomes clear in the film and during these interviews is that a lot of the depictions and assumptions made by the German voiceover, which itself is a translation of the English script, are simply false. So by speaking to these people who were involved in the making of this film, but in the original remain voiceless, Nana manages to reappropriate the footage to let them tell their own stories and also to deconstruct the narrative that was imposed on them by these Western broadcast institutions. So I think this film is a great example for our project because while we are researching historical footage, we also encounter a lot of stereotypical and racist images and narratives, which are of course also part of film history. So instead of keeping these hidden in the archives, we want to expose them and recontextualize them, as you've seen in the work such as this. So yeah, I think I will stop here now and look forward to being in conversation now.
Mai, thank you so much. That was so interesting. Now, it's so great to hear those reflections from all three of our speakers. And yeah, it's something that hadn't occurred to me before, but this idea of the archival materials being in some way representing the past and people really re-representing the past and, you know, kind of challenging those assumptions that might have been made before. It's so interesting, and so I thought we could start the conversation today with all of you about what is it that is so important about the archival material. Is that it? You know, Mai, maybe you can start. Is there a certain authenticity or something also to using the real footage as opposed to just, you know, telling a news story about, for example, these people who were subject to the subjects of this documentary?
I think speaking from kind of an institutional perspective, because we are a film heritage institution, it's very important for us to also look at our own collection and to invite critical perspectives on it. So I think it's very important to not only produce new work, but also reflect on the history that our institution has also for a very long time preserved and collected.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, Jordi or Shane, do you want to come in on this as well and also give a reflection?
Yeah, of course. For me as producer, one of the most unbelievable things about archives is that we are voyeurs. We love as humans to see another humans doing things. And if you can watch people doing things in the past, you are making a time travel. When you use archives in your films, I have two parts. All the things that I'm filming, these filmations will be the archives in the future, and also the archives that I'm using that at the time that I'm using it, I'm allow the spectators to make a time travel and to travel in the past and watch people doing things 70, 80, 100 years ago. And that's really great because that makes our documentaries better.
I love this idea that the archives are the time travel. And Shane, you showed my favorite, one of my, shouldn't be too biased, but one of my favorite movies from your project, which is Passing Place. You know, it's also someone who has a connection to the Scottish Highlands really spoke to me about the smallest school. And do you think that there's using the archival material really helped to bring out this kind of reshaping of history or something here?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think in Shanine's case, it was a way of kind of revisiting that part of her life with her father by picking up his camera and going and having that encounter. And it's also developed her style of filmmaking. I think now she works with kind of archive-inspired filmmaking workshops in the Highlands as a, you know, as a follow-on from the film. So I think it was really meaningful and it really resonated with her experience, even though the time frame for, you know, the early 70s wasn't the time when she grew up. And I think we've found that a lot with the creative responses to the archive, that it does strongly resonate either in an emotional sense or even in terms of current political debates, not having moved on so much from what you see in the archive in terms of, various protests and issues with the environment, even the films that we've been looking at the last week in relation to the Reuters Filmmaking Challenge. There are strong parallels between the archive and current events in terms of the same issues kind of just being cyclical rather than being developed or resolved. So I think that's very important. I think also it comes to who gets to tell the story, in terms of you don't need a commission, you don't need to necessarily commercially license the footage if there are ways to access the footage and tell that story and bring new meaning to it. Beyond the lens of a professional filmmaker or a commissioned filmmaker. So I think that's really important about this as well, that we find ways to share the footage and then ways to develop creative approaches to getting it seen and getting those voices heard that can add something different to the original intention.
Oh, amazing. Thanks. Laura, shall we move on to the next question from you?
Yeah, definitely. I think maybe also interesting to address some of the questions coming in the chat. I think a major consideration for all filmmakers is the factor of authenticity in narratives, but also obviously in the images used. And Jordi, a question for you specifically is from the chat is, how do you ensure that the colorizing in your work is historically correct? Is that something that you had to research separately? How did you go about keeping that authenticity?
Absolutely. That's it. You need a huge amount of people researching in books, because there are two parts. When you are putting color, there are two parts. The life, that is very easy. You have a sky, you will put it a blue and there, and that's very easy. And the streets, the cars, people, that's very easy. But when you are doing things like the Spanish Civil War, and then you have militaries, uniforms, tanks, you need to planes, you need to be really, really very, I don't know how to say it, but you have to check every color, because you can be sure that if you do not do well, someone, a Mexican guy will phone us and will say, hey guys, this is not correct, because we are in a connected world. The Spanish Civil War has been seen in a lot of places, and just only one people call us to say, hey guys, the flag of my country is not well done. So we changed it because it was red. Then yes, you have to study a lot of books. You have to make a lot of pictures. A Spanish army allow us to go inside the biggest museum of uniforms to make a lot of pictures. So we were about 6 months investigating just to put the perfect color.
Wow. So I feel like there's a lot of fact checking as well that goes into specifically documentary filmmaking. Is that something, Shane, Mai, that you have experience with as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think from our experience working with the filmmakers and the creative responses, I think, yeah, the research that goes into it is really important in terms of casting the net wide in terms of the archive and finding a narrative or an alternative narrative that emerges on the particular subject. So I think it's not just about kind of putting the archive together into a new work. It's the whole research and the investigation of film and social history that goes into that. And also, it's a lesson in the different modes of documentary production over the years, which I think really engages kind of a new generation of filmmakers as well, in terms of not just analog film itself, but also earlier, iterations of video technology. And I think the texture and the whole production process that goes with that is an added enrichment of the experience. So I think all of that behind the screen stuff that you don't necessarily see in the finished product is all really valuable too, in terms of that broader education.
Yeah, no, wonderful to hear you say that, you know, all the stuff behind the screens, that's also a really important and fun part of the process as well. I was also wondering, obviously, as you know, talking about reuse, there are different types of platforms and archives, obviously, that we can all research and reuse. And I think you mentioned as well that aside from just institutional archives, you also reached out to private collection holders, etc. And I was wondering, how does the experience differ when contacting and reaching out to different types of institutions, local, regional, private? Are there any tips or tricks that you could maybe share about reaching out to these different types of platforms?
Yeah, I think it really depends. For example, we are also looking a lot at the catalogs of broadcast stations, and there's a formalized process of getting in touch with these archives and requesting access. So most of the times it's a lot of kind of clearance of rights to work with these films or screen them in the cinema. But when we're looking at, for example, the archives of film schools, in a lot of times they don't have the work themselves. It's only cataloged, and we have the contact of the filmmaker, for example. So that's a lot of kind of more negotiating on private terms. So sometimes we also get in contact with the filmmaker through relatives and asking them if they're interested in collaborating with us. For example, we can offer digitization capacities, and also the possibility of maybe preserving their work through a restoration. So it's a different mode of engaging with someone privately or personally, rather than through a large institutional archive, for example.
Yeah, fascinating. It's yeah, interesting about the actual negotiation that goes into this, and what can you offer the collection holder. I feel also a huge barrier of creative reuse is obviously copyright as well. Is there have you run into this a specific issue in your work, Shane, Jordi maybe, and how did you go about yeah, kind of resolving that copyright matter?
Shane, I begin. Okay, very easy. Put a lawyer in your life.
A lawyer, okay.
Yeah, and if you can put two, better than one, because lawyers sometimes are not agree, and one lawyer says one thing, one lawyer says another thing. So you need to have extremely good lawyer teams with you, checking every film that you are using, because I have to make a difference when you're working with public institutions as Filmoteca Española, where there are archives, property of the government. So you have to make one negotiation to use a huge amount of collections. And when you are using private collections have his owners, so you have to make a negotiation with them. We have a law in Spain, so you have to be very respectful with this law. It's not the same law in Spain than in the other countries. Then when you're working with archives of Germany, of England, of US, you have to check both laws just to be sure that both laws says the same or not. And if not, you have to accomplish what says one law and what says the other law. So put as much lawyers as you can in your life, and you will sleep better.
Is that something you share as well, Shane? Do you get a good night's sleep knowing that you've got a good lawyer?
Yeah, I mean, legal advice is very helpful. And as you already said, knowing your jurisdiction or what country you're working in, you know, you need to be aware of the local laws, the copyright exemptions, obviously make make use of the copyright exceptions where you can. I think Bart Maletti, who a couple of us know, I think he's in the room today, and copyrightuser.org is a UK resource that people can use. So I'm not too sure of European similar websites, but yeah, just get to know what the copyright is and what fair use or fair dealing may apply, or otherwise just reach out to archives. I mean, I think they are, in my experience, they're extremely approachable in terms of non-commercial educational use, and they're there to help and to help you make the best film you can, while also needing to generate the income to keep the restoration and keep their collections going. So they are very approachable, and I'd encourage you to reach out and just find out the particulars of whatever you're trying to use.
Great. Fiona, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. No, this is a really interesting discussion, and I also see some comments in the chat. And I think, what we're really also aiming at from the Europeana side, and I'm sure also from EU Screen, is to encourage the people who hold the collections to also make them available, and to really encourage this kind of reuse in a way where the licensing and so on is already thought of. But I do think, of course, we need a bit more work on that. That's why we're here. That's why we're spreading the word. But something else I was interested in is this kind of ethical aspect. Sometimes when archives are making the content available to creatives, they might feel that they maybe have some agenda, or they might not be so comfortable sometimes with what comes out of that creative process. And Mai, I wondered, because what you've shown is this really interesting intervention. Is it something that has ever come up with you, that you have to convince people, maybe your colleagues or something, that it's okay to let people use the material and to see what comes out of that?
I think, yeah, it really depends on the material, and we are very aware that if we're, because most of the times we have an established relationship with someone, and we're familiar with their work, and we know that, for example, in Nana's case, her research interest was in post-colonial filmmaking. So there's already, I think, an awareness of the sensitivity of the material we're dealing with. And that's why it's, I think, also important to kind of recontextualize it and give it framing in a way that also speaks against the ideas and stereotypes that are inscribed in it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Jordi, Shane, do either of you have a reflection on something like this?
Well, you're talking with a producer. We do not like limits. We wish to use everything to do whatever we want. So I know that this sentence could be not too much respectful, but if anyone take my films, the films I produce, all my films are extremely respectful with everyone. I'm using archives just to explain history. Maybe if you are on the right side of political of Spain, you don't like what I'm speaking, what I'm telling in my films. And if you are in the left side of politicals, you also don't like. You cannot make everyone happy, that's for sure. But we don't like limits. And we think that creation will need open doors. But I insist, we are extremely respectful, explaining history. We work with a lot of historians, we work with a lot of people who is always checking what we are telling in our films, just to be sure they are correct.
Yeah, amazing. And I think it's good to have that dialogue, and through the material. It's really amazing. Shane, do you have any reflections on this one too?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting balance, particularly from working with the archive partners or the cultural heritage institutions. I mean, I guess they're assessing the risk of making the material available and not misrepresented or misused, while allowing the creative freedom to respond to it in a way that may not have been the original intention or be, align with the political view of the creator or those featured. So I think it's a tricky balance there when you talk to kind of emerging creatives about showing respect and thinking ethically about how the people behind the camera or in front of the camera would have felt about the representation and the re-representation in the new work. But also, working with your creativity to work with your own kind of personal set of ethics around that particular subject, to make the best film you can within those parameters. So I think it makes for a very creatively and intellectually stimulating experience to kind of weigh all these issues as you're making the work. And then obviously the audience will have its own interpretation and feed it back to you in terms of whether you got that balance right, I think, so.
Yeah, amazing. And do you have any advice for those archives or cultural institutions that have that collections? I mean, what would your kind of main advice to them be?
Mine would be to try it with a small pool of archival material. I mean, that's what we've done with Make Film History. I mean, I think all of the partners have made a small part of their collection that they owned that was deemed the lowest risk for reuse available, in the hope that it won't be misused or cause reputational damage or any of the things that an institution might fear might come from such a project. And that hasn't materialized, so that the trust has grown in terms of how open they can be about making more material available and seeing the educational benefits of that within their public service remit, but also the connection they can then get with the new generation of creatives or within education, or fulfilling a lot of other aspects of their role and building that engagement with their collection. So I would just encourage them to try it out if they haven't already. And obviously to join up across Europe in terms of the people who are active in this to kind of build those networks so that we can see more of these films become available and see the responses that they can inspire.
Amazing. I think working together, yeah, exactly, we can achieve more, I think. And Mai, do you have any reflections or a call to action maybe for other film heritage institutions?
Oh, that's a big it's a big task. I guess no, just taking from this conversation, I also think we're kind of moving in a direction with the project where we're also trying to open up the archive also beyond these more established perspectives of professionals, professional archivists, professional filmmakers, and to invite, for example, also the communities in Frankfurt to the museum. So we're definitely also working on expanding the kind of the scope of the archive to incorporate other perspectives as well.
Fantastic. Sounds like great work everyone's doing. Jordi, you have any sort of request to archives? Something that we should work on?
My God, I have thousands
I
of
had a feeling.
requests, things to all institutions and private companies who move archives. But no, I'm joking. I mean, the only request I have is about public domain. In Spain, public domain goes very slow. It's like no one wants to talk about the possibility of have archives in public domain, free archives. That's like a nightmare for all of them. Nodo have 2 years in public domain. Nodo archives from 1943, 1944 and in public domain. But if you call to Radio Televisión Española and you ask for any movie of these 2 years, they will rate a lot of money to you. So we have a very, very big job to do in public domain in Spain, just to be clear how much footage are available to people who want to make documentaries without big budgets.
Amazing. Yeah, I think clear labeling of the rights and making things available that are in public domain is really, really important. Laura, what do you think? We have some work to do, I think. nursing.
I think we do. Yes, we've got a lot to take back and work on, and I think we've also got a lot of documentaries to watch as well. We've only seen small snippets, so I'm looking forward to that too.
Yeah. Do you have any last questions? We're almost at time, but
I think what's also important was also a question in the chat is aside from creating these documentaries, but the educational aspect of your guys' work. I think Shane, you mentioned a creative reuse guide that you guys have published. How important is it, do you feel, to really share what you've learned and your knowledge with educators or students or filmmakers?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the idea of the online course that we did in terms of, it was really fascinating for me to interview people like Mark Cousins and Charlie Shackleton and Onyeka Igwe, but not just the filmmakers, the archivists, the archive producers, the editors, everybody who touches the archive in that whole process, and get their views. And it's not there's no one way to do it. There are, peculiarities. It's like detective work, clearing rights. I remember Annie Shaw at the BFI talking about everybody has their own kind of process. So it's great to have that 360 view of the whole process from lots of different perspectives. And I think it's also important that it's not just about emerging creatives creating these films, but it's about sharing them and creating a community where people can see them and get inspired, that it can bring something to their own creative journey as well, whether that's professionally or whether it's just as a hobby, but it kind of enriches their creative life, I guess. And I guess economically it can help cultural heritage institutions in terms of the value of their collections, that it has a stronger place in education and can be seen in that way, so that it can, continue to play a strong role in kind of how these filmmaking approaches integrate kind of archival reuse into them as a connection to the past.
Great. Is that something I can see Jordi nodding as well? Is the educational, the transfer of knowledge, is that something you can find yourself in?
Absolutely. I'm
Great.
extremely proud of professors of universities or schools that wants to use our films to show them to the students, and I love that. Spanish Civil War is in an educational platform in the US, and I love that. Yeah.
Great. Fiona, I think we've run out of time at the moment. Do you maybe want to let everyone know how we're going to address all the other questions in the chat and all that?
Yeah, we'll have a look through and we'll mail you. We'll also make the video available on YouTube, and we can send it around everyone. We'll also put it on LinkedIn, so if you follow us on LinkedIn, then you will see it there. But thank you so much for joining, everyone, and for your questions. We're going to have more of these webinars, so again, watch this space, watch our LinkedIn, and it'll be great to hear from you all again. But yeah, thank you so much to our speakers. We really appreciate having you all here today. And thank you, Laura. You've been an excellent co-host.
It was a pleasure, Fiona. Let's do it again sometime.
For sure.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.